And let me tell you something she says all the time. I didn't have a choice, Colette. Yeah. When you're faced with that, you just fucking fight. It's like a switch that goes off and you just go for it.
Welcome to the Council of Dudes podcast. I'm your host, Vinny Brusco. I am a father, a husband, the founder of Agora Social Club, a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, a certified life coach, and a facilitator of the Council of Dudes men's group. This podcast is here to help you tap into and follow your golden thread, that feeling that pulls you forward to become the best version of yourself. If you're someone who's into personal development and self-help and is looking to live a life of more alignment, then this is the podcast for you. Subscribe to the channel, click the notification button, and follow along on the journey of the show.
Hi, this is Colette from New Day Vitality, and you're checking out the Council of Dudes podcast.
And here we go.
How are you? What a load. You can't start therapy that way, right? What brought you here today?
How are you feeling?
How are you feeling?
How's your week been?
Oh, what a loaded question.
Good one.
How has your week been? Well, so first off, I had Stefania Amakuchi on the podcast, the great warrior woman that she is.
Incredible.
And then all of a sudden, the serendipitous breadcrumbs started to slowly unfold before the two of us. And you had reached out how you know her and your connection with her, and we could dive into that story. And then my wife was like, I went to high school with her. And then that whole thing. So the unfolding of this podcast was written in the stars long before you and I were ever specks on this earth.
Yeah, we manifested it way before. Exactly.
What are your feelings on all the I feel like there's a lot. Manifestation seems to be like the word of the day.
Yeah. So I think it's sort of cliche now, right? In a lot of ways to sort of talk about like manifestation and all this. It's kind of on the corny level, but I still love it. I dive into it all the time and I genuinely believe in it. I genuinely believe that we manifest. The script is already written. We have choice and we have free will, but we kind of go into different directions depending on what's already been scripted for us.
So do you use manifestation or manifestation practices in your therapy?
I do.
How do you incorporate that?
So I'm a holistic practitioner, as you know. So a lot of the work that I do comes from like a holistic background. And it's really fun. So some people totally are into it. And some people are like, it's too fluffy. It's the bells and whistles. Don't want to hear about it. And I'm also very clinical. I love I'm a neuro junkie. Love it all.
Yeah.
So if somebody's open to it, right, we kind of start to open up those conversations and manifesting like, where do you want to be in 5 years? Like, let's talk about it. Let's draw it out. Let's, paint it out. Like, what are we talking about here? What does it look like? What does it feel like? How do you get there? And that's what I've done like my entire life. So like, I've always had I can show you on my phone. I have all these like crazy ideas, right? And I'm like, but they're going to happen. They're 100% going to happen. It's already scripted. I know it, right? And I'm going to go down that direction, but I'm going to manifest it. I'm going to just like sit on it. It's going to happen. I'm going to believe it. I've done that with every single aspect of my life.
So let's shelf manifesting. I want to get back into manifestation practices and I want to get back into what that actually means. But how did you first get on this therapeutic journey?
Oh, that's a big question. That's a big one. Okay. So when I was younger, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer, super young, 30 years old, and she passed away at 33. My life was one way prior to that. And then once she passed, my life took a totally different turn. And it was not easy. It was not easy at all, obviously, right? Nobody should have to go through that with anyone, a parent, especially so young. And I think, I say this all the time, I think that in a lot, it's going to sound kind of fucked up too, but I genuinely think in a lot of ways, my mom gave her life for us because our lives would have went in a different direction and I wouldn't be who I am today if that didn't occur. I know it kind of sounds twisted.
I understand.
Fucked up, but the reality,
you're in a safe space. You could
it's a safe space. It's a safe space. So our lives were like the picture perfect, like white picket fence kind of life, sure. Right? And, I don't think I would be where I am today by any means whatsoever if she was still here. But I think how it all kind of unfolded, like it was raw, it was real. We kind of got thrown to the wolves and we had to survive in a lot of ways. And I think because of that experience, like I became the empath that I am today, that I'm able to sit with people and genuinely hold space for them and see things through different lines of perspective and eyes, which again, I don't think would have been my life at all if that hadn't happened. So that happened. Life was really hard for a really, really long time. But I kept pushing through. I had really good support systems. I had really good people surrounding me. And I was like, I want to be that person one day for someone. Like when you're at the end of the rope, right? And you're ready to tap out, like, and you need that. I want to be that person for someone. Like, I want to tell them that I see you, right? And that like you have value and like, it's going to change. It might not change now, right? It might be really tough and you're going to be in that dirt for a long time, but there's light at the end of the tunnel. Again, sounds kind of corny, but like that's literally was my experience. And that's why I chose this path. I couldn't do anything else. I love what I do.
I could tell from our conversations prior to this, it comes off very genuinely, and you could hear it in what you're doing and the work that you're doing. So often you hear, like, you know, especially in coaching and therapy, you know, you are the coach or the therapist that you needed at one point. So as that young girl who lost her mother, you needed, in some regards, someone like yourself to hold, I hate that term, to hold space, right, for you, to be empathetic for you while you were going through this journey. So did you have any, I know you said you had a great support system. What did that support system look like? Yeah.
So my mom's mom, my nanny, this itsy bitsy teensy weensy little English lady who had like the perfect little English accent and everything, absolutely amazing, strongest soul I've ever met, was hands down like my savior. She's like the one that taught me what life is about, and unconditional love is the most powerful healer in the world, and it changes you. And I'm telling you, this woman was Mary Poppins.
Yeah.
I'll get emotional talking about her.
That's okay. You can get emotional.
She still is a major factor and drive in my life every single day.
You mentioned the word seen, and that pairs very well with the idea of unconditional love. And one thing I learned through reading How to Win Friends and Influence People, which is more of a business book, but realistically, it's a humanistic book. It's about human relationship, is that most people, I would say all people, want to be seen, right, and heard. And when you alchemize being seen and heard and you put into a framework, essentially it boils down to being unconditionally loved. In the work that you're doing, would you say that that's where most people are, that's their Achilles heel, that's where they're struggling, they're not seen and heard, and they're not unconditionally loved in some capacity? Yeah. I would say like maybe the umbrella of it sort of surrounds that. I think that everybody sort of has like different concerns, right? Sure. And different goals and different, experiences. But I think the umbrella of it all is like that being seen and validated and just feeling heard. I mean, again, sort of kind of sounds cliche, but like a lot of people don't get that. I mean, you'd be surprised, like stemming from childhood. Yeah. Like they get it, but they don't. Do you know what I mean? So where don't, so you're a mother, I'm a father, I have two small children, and amongst the busy life that we live in, it is hard as a parent to be so present and be so attentive. And then you add in smartphones and businesses and work and everything else. Just on the front of it, it's hard and difficult. But now add in all the other things that go into living a life. Mm-hmm. How do parents actually be present with their children and actually let them feel genuinely seen and heard? Because so much, my son's 5, so much of his outburst, and my wife and I will talk about it, is like, he just needs attention, right? So how do parents like navigate that? Yeah. So I think it's really hard in today's world. I think in some instances it's nearly impossible, right? I mean, like you said, you got the phone, you got this. I have 4 kids, right? Yeah, that's and they're wild. All teeny, tiny. That's wild. So I don't know how you're even in clothes right now. I don't know how you're present or dressed or like, I have 2 and those. I manifested it. I get dressed today. No, it's really a wild, wild ride, but the best ride yet. Yeah. But it sort of kind of sounds a little funny, but like at times, like when things are going on with the kids, like and you're multitasking, right? Like I have to be very conscious of the fact that like my son needs my energy right now, right? Or my daughter needs my energy. And I literally have to take whatever I'm doing and put it to the side, right? Because I love, I always say like my practice is my first baby. I love what I do. I love it. I genuinely love being able to hold that sacred space for people, but my kids are everything, right? Sure. So if something's going on with work, as long as it's not an emergency, I'm like, God, it's
gotta go, right? Like, what do you need? And like, that's what I say. And I do it in public a lot. And I see people kind of look at me funny with my kids because it sounds almost like scripted. So like my son's having like a breakdown, right? In a tantrum or whatever. And I'm like, I see you're really upset.
Oh, you're like the Instagram mom that's doing that and makes me feel like a really shitty dad.
No. I don't always do it. I don't always do it. But for the most part, like that's just kind of who I am.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh my gosh, you seem really upset.
Is that your go-to?
That's my go-to.
See,
that's my natural.
See, my go-to is not that.
Yeah.
My go-to is like, motherfucker, and then I'll be like, all right, that's not helping anybody at all.
No.
Definitely not helping them. Let me pull it back a little bit.
But it took years to get to this point.
Sure.
Like investing in myself and like knowing what I need to regulate myself like on a daily basis to be able to kind of get to that natural organic approach. So I'm like, but that doesn't happen all the time by any means, right? Like I'm human. I'm not perfect by any means whatsoever. But a lot of times that's what I'll do. Like I'll be like, hey, what's going on? What are you feeling? And and you can tell like it's so not natural for society that like people look at me like, the fuck is wrong? Like, why is she so calm? He's screaming and yelling. I'm like, and there's times, right, where he's screaming and yelling. I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to jump. I'm going to jump, right?
Yeah.
But for the most part, I'm like, he's 5, right? He's 3. The babies are 1. Like, this is normal, right? Like, we have a hard enough time controlling this. Like, what's happening with them? And again, it's like a constant effort to make sure that I'm present with what I'm feeling and what's going on with them to show up for them. It's not easy.
The other part of it is it's never them. Right. It's really never them. Like anytime, and my daughter's 9, so it could be her, but for the 5-year-old, and it's not her, but so many times it's more about my relationship with something that I didn't do, exactly. Right? If I didn't get up early enough, if I didn't get a workout in, if I didn't, or what compounding effect happened that's led me to here where now I'm on the heels of life and now I'm backed into a corner. Now I need to react to everything that they're doing. And I'm not giving myself the grace or the space to respond and show up and be like, all right, what's going on? What do you need? And the times where I am not on my heels, I'm way calmer, way more receptive, way more loving and calmer versus the times where I'm like, all right, now I got to swing my way out of this.
Yeah. So I think you're 100% on point with that, right? Like how you're feeling energetically, right, is literally what's going to pass through for your children as well, right? So like if you wake up in the morning and you're rushing, right, and you didn't have time to do anything, like you're going to hold on to that energy all day. And if they're acting out and you're already starting with this energy, you're already you're up the pyramid, right? But if you start like centered, doesn't matter, still going to get disrupted throughout the day, right? Life happens. But if you start centered, you're starting lower on the pyramid. So you're not so quickly to get up to that intense level. And that's sometimes what I share with clients when they're like, how do I show up for my kids? How do I see them? Like, how do I validate them? I'm like, see yourself first. Where are you? Like, where are you starting each morning? Like, what's happening for you? Like, how do you center yourself? I know every morning, and my husband makes fun of me. It's comical at this point, but I swear it's how I stay grounded. Every morning I do like self-Reiki and I do like a stretch. It's 5 minutes. Sometimes it's even more, like less than that. It's rushed. But it's like how I get to the place where I need to be so that I can show up as the best mother, the best therapist, the best wife, the best friend possible each morning. And that's like literally 5 minutes of my day.
Yeah. And that can make all the difference, right? Like especially in social media and health and wellness space, we think that these morning routines need to be these long, extravagant processes of cold plunges and saunas and journaling and matcha teas and red light therapy and all that stuff, which is all well and good if your life supports that. 100%. But when you're a mother of 4, you're a father of 2, and you're in charge of morning routine, and it's like, just fucking get dressed, right? Yeah. The slightest thing that you could do just to give yourself a little bit of an edge, in the day, makes a big difference.
Yeah, 100%. I know that days when I don't, hi, somebody's walking in. Okay. Waving. I know the days that I don't do it, that I just don't function the way that I should. You know what I mean? Like I can't show up for them the way I can.
You're not calibrated.
No. And I also say this too, like before I had kids, so you go to school, right? And you have experiences as a therapist and like you see life in a specific perspective, right? And understanding. And not that because I'm a mother now that's shifted and like I'm a better therapist, but like I think the expectations that I had on parents before I had kids were pretty high. You know what I mean? Like I would say to a mother like, hey, just an hour a day, just meditate or go for a walk. And they always looked at me pretty fucked up. Like, what is she talking about? I don't got an hour, right? I got 4 kids. I got 2 kids. And now, as a mother, I'm like, I can't even believe that I thought that was realistic.
Right.
Now I'm like, if you have 30 seconds to go in the bathroom,
Cry.
and like just tap, cry. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like if you get 2 minutes every morning,
Right.
that's what you get. I mean, not that that should be the standard across the board, but like, hey, 2 minutes is 2 minutes. 5 minutes is 5 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. We parenting definitely shifts the relationship in the best ways, but it definitely shifts the relationship with the world and then yourself, obviously, right? They are potentially the best mirror for you, right? There's nothing 100%. I love more than my children, but there's no one I want to punch in the face more than my children.
Oh, yeah.
Like I love them to beyond measure, but there's no, if you're tucking your kid in and you get a random elbow to the eye or to the nose, I can go from, I love you so much, you're the greatest thing ever, God bless you, all these things, to like, I'm going to fucking throw you out the, and like,
you feel it.
Right?
It's like you're twitching.
You're twitching. Yeah. It's amazing.
I know that. Yeah.
It is the best. It pulls out the most extreme versions of you that
you didn't even know existed.
Yeah.
I call that like the skeletons in the closet, the dark, like, places of ourselves that we didn't even know were there. Like we didn't know that we could jump from 0 to 100 because somebody's like rubbing your arm, right? Or somebody's like, mom. And you're like, what the fuck do you want? Hold on, you know?
Yeah.
There's two things actually I want to mention on that. So I was thinking, Gary Vee.
Yeah.
Okay. So he had this podcast. It was like one of his first ones. This stuck with me. It really did, especially through motherhood. And you probably could find it. It's like one of his most famous ones. But and I curse a lot, by the way, so I apologize. Not in front of my kids. Sometimes.
In front of my kids all the time. It's terrible.
No, I don't.
Is it bad?
I try not to.
What, like,
it happens.
What's the scale of cursing? Shit?
No. So the funniest thing is my husband. This is a side note. I do have ADHD too, so my
fine. No, I'm with you. I could follow you.
Oh, perfect. Great.
We're good.
Great. So my husband was taking meatballs out of the fridge like a couple days ago. I didn't tell you. I told somebody else it was funny. And the meatball like fell out of the fridge or whatever. And he was like, fucking meatball. And I laughed, right? Because it was funny.
It's hilarious.
And now my son goes to school and he's like, are we having fucking meatballs? And I'm like,
that.
oh my God. Because he thinks that's just what it's called. But I try to stay conscious of that. So Gary Vee basically had this podcast. And in this podcast, he said, no fucking expectations. You shouldn't have expectations about anything, anyone, yourself, anyone. Like nothing. No expectations at all. I think this kind of goes hand in hand with manifestation too. Because if you don't have expectations, right, and you're manifesting something to work towards it, you're not putting the pressure on yourself to get there. You're just manifesting it. You're just like holding that space for it. But in this podcast, he talks all about it. It goes really, really deep. And that's how I do motherhood. Swear to God. So like if we're running super, super late and it's like, well, now we're going to be like 20 minutes. I'm like, no fucking expectation. I don't care. I'm just going to sit here on the floor with you while you cry. And like, I swear that's what I do now. So like, I'm like, all right, just take a scale back. Like if I'm 20 minutes late and the teachers look at me funny, it's cool. It's fine. It is what it is. Never going to get that 20 minutes back in life, right? I'm going to be 80 years old one day and wish that I was with the little kids crying on the floor because you're going to miss it. I know it sounds crazy, but you will. So that's like kind of what sticks in my head. And I always go back to that podcast where I'm like, I don't have any expectations right now. I'm just going to be.
So then no expectations, but standards, right? Those are kind of, because if you say like, all right, I have no expectations, are you setting your kids up in a sense that like, all right, anything goes. And now they're not in a position where they can manage in the real world, so to speak?
Yeah. Well, I think they're so young right now that I don't have to implement that. I think that we have a lot of pressure that like, as soon as they're born, like we have
to start fucking reading.
No.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay. So like you want to take an extra 5 minutes to say you don't want to put your pants on and get dressed. Like, okay, that's cool.
I don't want to put my pants on either.
That's
like,
okay.
I don't blame them.
I get it. You're tired. I'm tired too. Let's just sit here for 5 minutes. Like that's kind of the way I sort of take that approach. But I think at a certain age, right, we have to start to slowly, I think as parents nowadays, it's just pushed from the second they're born. Where now I'm like, hey, so one of the babies is walking, the other one's not walking. She's not walking yet. She's in the threshold of norm. It's fine. But with my first, I would have been paranoid. I would have been freaking out. I would have been pushing it. Now I'm like,
Well, that also comes from experience, though. That also comes from having the experience and being able to say, okay, I have the experience now, and you could find comfort in that experience because you could pull from it at any time and be able to allocate it to whatever scenario. But if you don't have that reference of experience, it's a totally different ballgame.
Yeah. So I think it was probably around that time when that podcast sort of highlighted things for me when my first was born, when I had expectations for everything. Like I had, one of your signs said it, the comparison. Like
that's one of my favorite quotes of all time. Comparison is the thief of joy.
That's all I did, right? Like, oh, this kid's doing this one's doing that. I knew like as a therapist, like everybody develops at their own pace. And just because, one person gets there faster, it's not a race. You still get to the same place. But with my first, I didn't have the experience.
Right.
So I didn't really kind of like live by that. With my second, my third, my fourth, I'm like, no expectations. We'll get there. Like, I'm not putting pressure on you to put your pants on. You're tired. It's cool. Extra 5 minutes. We'll get there. Right. It's not right now. We don't have to run.
Yeah, that I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet with the parenting aspect of it. I still, and I don't think it's expectation. I think it's also just, again, my daughter's 9, my son's 5. So it's a little bit, they're in a different time frame of life. But I also do understand the just letting go kind of it and just allowing them to kind of be their own people. Yeah. Because again, they are, and you said it a little bit earlier, it's like I'm as a 40-year-old man, I'm like, in the throes of life. How can they not be? Because they don't have that pool of experience to pull from, right? They don't have all of these things to go, okay, I got to put on my fucking pants.
Yeah. And I don't want you to think that I'm like modeling like that. I always do, because I don't. Like sometimes I do not think of that saying, and I do have expectations and I do push them. But for the most part, I try to center back to like that idea, because I think it takes the pressure off me as a mother, but it takes the pressure off them just in society. You know what I mean? Just like
I do.
It's a lot. There's a lot of pressures.
And the pressure's only going to build. Like they're only this age at this time frame for only a limited amount of time, right? Like and I see it in my daughter who's 9. I see the throes of society starting to creep its way into her little mind. I see the comparison. I see this one's doing that, and this one's doing this, and this one got this grade, and I got this. And I start to see, because she's in school, and now she sees the other kids, and she sees the world. And with my son who's 5, and the joke in the house is like, he's just pure testosterone. He's unfiltered, pure testosterone. And for a while, my daughter, I would say, you're poking the bear, and he would bite. And I was like, dude, first off, you can't bite. I don't condone it. But I also understood that like how we said before, like how you can go from 0 to 100. Yeah. And when you realize that, like when you don't have that filter and all of the, the things that, Jung talked about and Freud talked about with the ego and the superego and the id. And when you don't have the filters of society to suppress that animalistic tendency, you're going to let it out.
Yeah. And he should. He's the
I know, he should bite,
right?
but
he shouldn't bite. But he should be able to feel empowered and safe enough around you that he can. You know what I mean? Like safely show you those emotions. Now, that doesn't mean that they're okay, right? And acceptable, but he has to feel safe enough that he can sort of like learn how to develop into a healthier space with them, right? But he's learning through you and your reaction and your response to it. Like if you were like, don't yell, don't ever yell, right?
Oh, well, that's
like,
always the case. I'm like, don't yell, stop screaming. And then meanwhile, here's the Neanderthal like, right? Yeah.
So it can get confusing too, right?
Sure.
But if we tell them like, don't ever yell, like as an adult, what are we telling them? Don't ever use your voice, right? Like, or your voice doesn't matter, when it does. So we have to almost like, that's why I say it's always like, I do that too. Don't yell. It's like a conscious effort that I have to kind of put into place at times to be like, oh, why did I just say don't yell, right? Or you're okay. That's my pet peeve. You're okay. I say it all the time, but I'm like, maybe he's not okay. Maybe he doesn't need to hear me say it's okay. Maybe he needs to hear me say, like I said, out in public, oh, you look like you're in a lot of pain right now. That's that.
Well, I think so much of it is us as parents wanting to coddle them in a sense. So by saying like, you're okay, it's almost like we're telling ourselves that they're okay, right? Like we're trying to convince, because we don't want to hear that they're not okay.
Yeah. You're like putting a Band-Aid on it because you're like, we got to get on with life, right? Like we got to get in the car, we got to get to school, we got to get to work, whatever it is. And again, I do it all the time, but I try to sort of make a conscious effort of it that it doesn't happen as often as it could be happening. The other thing I wanted to say to you, okay, so you were saying that like our kids are like us. Like they're like a pure, like a mirror image, right? Like we in a lot of ways mold them, right?
Sure.
To who they're going to be.
Blank canvases.
Well, yeah, exactly. And I thought of this, and I don't think I said this to you, but I think it was around the time we first spoke. So we went to see Wicked. Have you seen it?
I have not seen Wicked.
So good. Why haven't you seen it?
I haven't seen it. Kelly has seen it, and Emma.
Incredible.
Yeah.
So incredible. So we went to see it, and we were in the movie theater and we were all by ourselves. There was nobody there. It was like one of the days that like the kids have off or something. And it was just me and my two sons. One's 5, one's 3, and we're watching it. It's really incredible. Like you're emotional the whole time. Like
It's visually, I mean, I saw some clips and stuff. It's visually stunning. Yeah.
Yeah. It provokes so many different emotions, honestly. And even for little kids, like it's really interesting. And it's long. And while we're in it, the end scene is so beautiful. It's so cool. And I'm bragging at this because like you said, like they're like mirrors, but this was so incredible that my son did this. And I was like, oh my God, things stick. You know what I mean? Like it was just sort of like that.
I love those moments.
Picture of like, oh my God, this is
working.
So cool. Who are you?
Yeah. I love that. Yeah.
And so the witch, the green witch, right, is on, and she's sort of like the bad witch, right? Or like when you think of the Wizard of Oz or like the outcast or whatever it is, and that's how she's treated. And at the end, there's like this really powerful scene, and she gets on the broom and she's flying around and all this stuff. And he was like, mommy. And I was like, what? He's like, I love her. She is the most, did I tell you this? No. He goes, she's the most beautiful woman in the world. And I'm like, oh my God, I love you. And he's like, and nobody likes her because she's different, but because she's different, that's what makes her so special. And I'm going to marry her. I was like, oh my God, who are you? Like, where did you come from? Because the lens that we have, right, is like, she's the bad witch or she's the outcast. And he saw her as like beautiful.
He saw her.
Yes, that's it. And that was the moment where I was like, oh my God, this is so cool. Where did you learn this?
He learned it from you.
And I went home and I told my husband, he was like, that's you. That's you. That's all. I can't even take credit for it. That is all you.
Welcome to Agora Social Club, the Westchester's hub for guys to gather, connect, and unwind. In the last 6 years, I've been facilitating a men's group called the Council of Dudes. And within that 6 years, I realized that guys need a place where they can get together, connect, and build community. A place that's not the gym, that's not jujitsu, that's not the bar, but a place where guys can come with no ego and grow and develop together. So here we have our chess table. We're going to be having monthly chess lessons and our Take a Book, Leave a Book library. Some of these I've read, some of these I haven't. Quantum physics to personal development to fiction. We also have our record player area. In the last few years, I've become very obsessed with jazz music. And if you don't know how to play a vinyl, no big deal. It hooks up to your phone via Bluetooth. We have artwork from California to local artists. We have these small little work tables. So if you want to hang on the couch and get some work done, you can just come pop them open. And we also have our little workspace here with quotes from Muhammad Ali, Albert Einstein, Theodore Roosevelt. We also have our coffee bar, small fridge, and more quotes and artwork over the wall. Head on over to agorasocialclub.com, sign up for our free 7-day trial, and with that, you will get a key fob. Scan your key fob, and you have access to this space from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m., 7 days a week. So if you're a guy in the Westchester area and you're looking to gather, connect, and unwind with like-minded men, head on over to agorasocialclub.com.
It's amazing when they do things that will validate you as a parent.
Yes.
Right.
And that hard work.
And it's like, oh, like, you know, we'll get a letter home from whatever program Emma's in. And, you know, the response to her as a child is well received. And as a parent, you look at each other, your partner or whomever, and you're like, okay, all right, we're doing a good job.
We're not fucking up that bad.
Right. But that's the other part of it, because the reality is no matter what, you're going to fuck up your kids.
Always.
No matter what, no matter how much you show up, no matter how much you may be, whether you're a helicopter parent, snowplow parent, whatever parenting style you have, you're going to fuck up your kids.
Yeah. So you just got to show up perfectly imperfect. I say that all the time. Just be perfectly imperfect.
That falls back to the expectation piece, right? If you have these expectations as a parent, or you're looking at social media, or we bump into you in the supermarket and you're like, how do you feel? And I'm like, get the fucking card, let's go, right? That's going to be the expectation on me, where I'm like, I'm failing as a parent. But if you set that framework of like, hey, listen, I'm doing my best.
Exactly.
And everyone's best is different.
Yep.
I have to honor that best in me and moment to moment.
So that's why I always say that, like when people are like, when they see me in the grocery store and I'm doing that, they're like, oh my God, I'm failing. I screamed. I'm like, no. Let's make this very clear. Like I was trained to sort of be like this. I, you know what I mean? Like as a therapist, but also just as a human, like I had to work really, really hard on myself. Like this is not how I was when my firstborn was, and I'm not always like this. Like I just do the best that I can. And like the best that I can, the best that you can might all look different, but we're showing up and we're doing the best that we can.
So what did that work look like for you?
What do you mean? Like
Working to what was it comprised of? What did it consist of?
So I was in my own therapy.
Yeah.
I just like took the light and I shined it really bright. And I saw things that, like I said, skeletons in the closet, things that I didn't want to think about or work through or focus on. But, you know, my therapist was hard on me and I had to show up, and I think it changed, honestly.
Yeah.
Like,
And that's a fine line in therapy, right? You have like, and I'm going to get geeky on you, and you're going to keep up with me. So you have like the very humanistic Carl Rogers approach to therapy, which is very compassionate and empathetic. And then you have like the Gestalt therapy, which is very like in your face, very blunt, very abrupt, very like to the point. And there is a fine line in both of those where they need to kind of cross-pollinate, and you need to kind of weave them in between each other, because there are times when you need to see a person and show up and be that calm, empathetic person. But there's other times where you need to kick someone in the ass and be like, all right, we need to get things into gear.
Yeah. So I always say that. So people will call initially and be like, all right, I just want a CBT therapist, or I just want a therapist who only
And it's cognitive behavioral therapy.
yes,
Right,
or who only practices whatever it is. I'm like, okay, so that's not us. Right. Like, so we use a gazillion different types of therapeutic approaches. It's a tailored approach because you're a tailored person, right? So I'm not, and it works. Like, listen, some people just need CBT and they just see a CBT therapist, and it's for that.
Explain what CBT is for
Cognitive
those
behavioral therapy.
And what is that comprised of?
So cognitive behavioral therapy has like a very, I don't want to, it's not specific. They're all
It's a very broad approach to therapy.
yes,
Yeah.
but it's not, I don't want to say it's not as specific and tailored as some other approaches, but it's got like its own kind of script to it, like a certain amount of sessions and certain amount of things that you can do and you can't do, and is there homework? It's like things like that. And some people just want like a CBT therapist. Again, not as like detail oriented as the other approaches, but some people just want that approach. And so it's like almost like putting a person into like a box to me, right? Because I can only use this, and you don't want me to bring in anything else, but then I'm not going to really bring in any of the experiences or any of the tools that I think could be useful for you, right? As a person. Again, sometimes works for people and that's great, but I'm not just like a CBT therapist by any means. I don't even really consider myself a CBT therapist. I'm more of like positive psychology and Jung, and, you know, I put it all into a melting pot, and like I pick out what's going to work for you and what's not. And sometimes what I think is going to work for you doesn't work. You know what I mean? And vice versa. So we switch it up. But some people just want to have like a very, I shouldn't call it scripted, but a very specific.
It's more clinical.
Yes. Yeah.
Like it's actually like, it's like you said, it's like this amount of sessions, this amount of this amount of this, where things like Jungian psychology, more of the Carl Rogers Gestalt,
more open.
a little bit more open, a little bit more interpretive. Yeah. Obviously Jung's way more into the metaphorical space, way more into the ethereal, way more into the soul, which the CBT can get to, or at least it resolves the issues on a surface level, but when you get into the like person, layers. It doesn't get into the depths of them.
Yeah, that's actually a perfect way to think about it. Yes, I agree with you. So for some people, right, they're like, that's where I want to be. I want to stay in that space, and that's why I want to just see a CBT therapist, right? Or I just want to see a DBT therapist, right? Like people will call and literally say that. And it says it on on our website, it says that we offer a tailored approach. So like we all come with different, you know, backgrounds and experiences and, you know, specific certifications and et cetera. Like I'm certified in like every single thing you could think of, but it doesn't mean that I'm just going to like grab one and just utilize one. Like you might come to session one day and I might be like, we're in this place, right? And so like, we're going to do a little bit of exposure today where maybe somebody else may not be using that. And that's okay. Again, it's not like one size fits all by any means, but I think that you have to just meet a person where they are. And each session when they show up, sometimes they're not in that same place. Like life happens in between that week.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned you not wanting to face the things that you probably needed to face, right? And that goes back to the quote of the cave you fear to enter has the treasure that you seek, right? Mm-hmm. And those folks who are seeking out for the DBT or the CBT therapy, do you think that are they the same approach of like, hey, I just want to resolve this problem, and they think that that's the actual problem, when in the reality that you live in and the experience you live in, it's like, all right, but the reality is like, we need to go into the depths. Because I remember having a conversation with someone and they said to me, not everything's so deep. Mm-hmm. And my response was, you don't get off at the floor you find convenient. Some people get off at the 5th floor, the 3rd floor. For me, where everything that's worth something, if you want to see real transformation and change, you have to go to the basement.
Yeah.
And you have to go to that little corner that's dripping water, that has the spider webs, and you got to open up that box that's down there. Yeah. And that's very scary and uncomfortable for a lot of people. Yes. And the reality is that's where the real change roots from.
I agree. 100%. That's sort of like my lens of perspective on it as well, that I think it's much deeper than like listen, sometimes it is surface stuff, right? That people just want to work on, and people will call that and say, I just want to do this. And I'm like, they don't want to dive deep. They're not ready. And I'm like, listen, I'm not the therapist for you, right? Like if you want to just stay in that place, that's great. But like, I want to get you to somewhere else, right? Like I want to get you to I want to see like you feeling a certain way in a certain time, you know what I mean? Without you just staying in this space for the next 10 years, right? Like I don't see that as beneficial for you. Right. And some clinicians may agree and may not disagree. You may agree and may not agree, disagree or agree. But I just think it's sort of like where that person is and where you're meeting them and where they're willing to go. And some people are not willing to go there. And that means they're just not ready. Yeah. And that's okay, right? So I might say, call me when you're ready. Yeah. We're not there yet. I think the other thing is when people do call and they say like, I'm just looking for an EMDR therapist, right? It's because of like what they see on social media or what they hear about their friends. Like, oh, just do CBT. CBT is the best. And they don't really even know what CBT, like, so how many sessions is it? What is that? What is that? Like when I mention those details to them, they're like, oh, I didn't know that. My friend just told me like they did CBT and that's what works for them. And so like, that's going to work for me. And I'm like, but you're not your friend. Right. You know what I mean? Like, so it's going to be tailored approach, and we're going to pull from a whole different bunch of therapeutic approaches. And like, it's not one size fits all. And if that works for you, that's great. If it doesn't, here's somebody, that I found or whatever, who only practices CBT or CBT, and you can give them a call. Yeah. I think there's a lot of authenticity in that as well. Yeah. Right. Because, when you go see a therapist, sometimes people will just say, yeah, I can see you. I can see you. I can see you. And I'm like really into the first call and the assessment. Like, are we the right fit? Yeah. Because if we're not the right fit, I don't want to waste your time. You're going to show up. Like, I want you to show up in a place that like fits your needs. And if you feel like it's just CBT, that's not me.
Right. What are your thoughts on therapists that see their clients for like years on end? Because I feel like it's a weird position. Because I know, like, I'll talk to people like, oh, yeah, I've been seeing my therapist for like 8 years. I'm like, that's a problem. Like, with all due respect, I understand that like they may serve as like this pillow for you and this comforting blanket. And that's a beautiful thing. And I understand that, but it's like, you need to get off the tit, so to speak, and you need to be able to kind of remove yourself. And that's where like somewhat coaching has made such a big surge. And I know a lot of therapists who are now shifting away from the traditional therapist model because of the red tape, because of the model that's behind it. And they're starting to shift into more coaching and more of that lens, because it's like, hey, we're going to see for this time frame and then we'll reassess. And then this time frame and then we'll reassess. Whereas in the traditional therapeutic model, it seems like it's an ever ongoing process, which personal development, self-actualization, enlightenment, all of that is going to be forever your life. It doesn't ever go away. But are you ever really empowered to go and discover those things on your own?
I think that's a really good question. And I think depending on who you're talking to and what therapist is sitting across from you, you're going to have a very different perspective on this. So I think you meet people at different times in their lives and they're going through different things and they're in a different place. And sometimes when you meet with someone for a long period of time, it's because you're working on one thing and then something else happens. Or that one thing that you were working on, you didn't really get to work on because life happened and you're back into a different place. And also I think you're meeting them where they are. So like my therapist, when I first met, I wasn't a mother. Like I was a totally different person, right? And I went to therapy for one specific reason at that time. And now that I'm a mom, like I need to talk to a therapist as well because there's a lot of other things and it's a different place, right? Now I could go see a different therapist, but I like the person that I was seeing and I have that connection with, and they understand me and know my story. So I'm comfortable there. So I will continue there.
It's a great point.
People, that doesn't always work though, right? You want to kind of get them to a place where it's like, you're right. I want you to go out in the real world. Tell me how it goes, right? Like if it doesn't, like we got you to this place, you've, reached these goals. There's this progress, these improvements. Like, are you ready? Yeah, we're ready. Okay. So we're going to have our last session today, but I want you to know that my door's open. So like in a month from now, if you feel like I need support or something happens in life, you can call me. But right now, let's, and that happens too. That's how you usually close a case. But some people, they have to transition. So I might see somebody every week, twice a week. And then we go to once a week. And then we go to every 2 weeks. And then we go to monthly. I have someone who I've probably been seeing for 10 years, but I see her like every 3 months, check-ins. It's not even therapy anymore. It's just a check-in call, see how she's doing. There's been times during that though, life has happened, right? And she's like, I got to get back in. Like, I can't, like there's something happened, whatever's happened, right? I need to go back to week. And that's okay. But let's try to get back to a place where you're like once a month. You know what I mean?
I do.
And that happens too. I think it's very unique to each individual and like what life is, like what's happening for them in life and what they're experiencing or what you're working on. Because sometimes it's like one thing, like you said, that you work on, and then like you just open up this can of worms, and it's like that's not going to happen in 8 sessions.
Right.
That's not going to happen in 20 sessions. Like, oof, this is deep, right? And this goes into so many different areas. Like, I don't put a stamp on it. Some people will call and say that too. Like, hey, can you sell me 10 sessions? I'm like, no, that's not the way it works for therapy, right? Like, I don't even know you, right? I don't know what we're going to be talking about.
Right.
10 sessions might not be enough, or maybe you need less. I don't know.
Right. Well, that also comes from again, going back to that experience part, that comes from a strength place. That comes from you being confident as a therapist and having the experience to say, I'm good not taking you. I'm not the right person for you. Or it may take more, it may take less, but that comes from also an authenticity place. Yeah. Like you wanting to show up, as you said, when you were younger, I want to show up and be that person. Yeah. You can only be that person to the most authentic version of that person, right? Exactly. If you were just taking on everybody, then you wouldn't be honoring that version of you.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm very passionate about, and this is how all my clinicians are, we're very passionate about the work that we do. So it's like, it's like a puzzle piece. It either fits or it doesn't, and you don't want to push it. And I feel like when people are like, oh, I'll just take you, like you're trying to push things into those puzzle pieces, and that isn't authentic work, right? It's like, somebody else might be a better fit, and that's okay, right? It's not personal, but right. I think you're right. I think it comes with like years of experience in doing this that you've gotten to a place where you're like, I'm not the right fit for you. Give so-and-so a call. I think you guys would, kind of vibe better, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Some people aren't there or maybe they kind of feel like they are a good fit and they don't realize. And sometimes that happens too. Like I've met with people where I'm like, I think this could work. And I've met with them and it's just like, right away, it's not working. Like, and they know it and you know it, right? And then it's having that conversation, which sometimes is a very hard conversation. Yeah. Like, I don't think we're a good fit, but so-and-so I think would be great for you. I'm going to give you a referral.
But that also goes to like you honing in on your intuition, right? That goes to you honing in on like those feelings that come over you and be like, oh, okay, like this isn't flow based, right? There's some, this clutch is kind of sticking at some points, and that's natural in any type of personal dynamic, like that. Those things are going to happen, but beyond the surface level, when it is not built out of a place of flow, it becomes almost like tangible to some degree.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And again, I think it's not like I didn't go into this sort of having that. I think it's like years of experience, right? Where you start to feel that like, oh, like, initially, I think I told you this when I first started my practice, I still had like a supervisor. I didn't need a supervisor, but I had someone who was like a mentor who I paid to meet with every week to just kind of support me through this journey, owning a business and like everything that comes with that, being a therapist in private practice, just because like you don't get that right off the bat, right? Like that kind of comes with experience where you're like, are you pushing it? Or like, are you pushing that puzzle piece in and it doesn't fit? Or maybe it just doesn't fit.
Right.
And it's okay if it doesn't fit. There's so many therapists who have totally different approaches and styles. And like, it's not one size fits all. So like the therapist for me may not be the therapist for you and vice versa. And that's great. That's good. That's what makes us unique.
Yeah. Was there anything that made you more drawn to, other than who you are as a person, but anything that drew you to more of that Jungian approach to things? Like, was it like the depth of it? Was it the language of it? Because it is Luffy. It is woo woo. It is the ethereal. It is the unknown. I love that stuff. I dive right into it. I was, Emma's in a religious class and going back to church, and, finding the right person who speaks your language is so important. So many times I've been in religion, Catholic school and all that stuff my entire life, but finding the one priest that says, like, I remember when she was getting communion, the priest said, remember when you come up and you're receiving the God of the universe. And I was like, whoa. I looked at Kelly, I was like,
I like that.
He speaks my language.
Yeah, I like that.
I'm with this dude, right? Because again, when you start to bring in religion into all this stuff, it can get very compartmentalized, and now you're interpreting things, and that's a whole different rabbit hole. Yeah. But what drew you to this approach of therapy?
It's interesting that you say that too, by the way. There is like Christian-based therapists as well, right?
Yeah.
So some people make that call as well. Like, are you a Christian-based therapist? Are you whatever it is? And again, that's the beauty of all this, right? There's so many of us that have different specialties and backgrounds and certifications and experiences that like really helps to kind of find that connection. I would say I'm pretty woo. Do you think I'm woo?
I think you're woo. You're very woo.
Okay. So my husband, I think he's very sweet. You know what he says? He says that, you don't necessarily know that you're woo when you show up, but you're like an undercover hippie. I'm like, what does that mean? He's like, you're just like, you're weird. Like, and I'm like, what do you mean weird? I'm like, I'll go talk to the tree and stuff on the DL. I didn't even realize he saw me doing this. Or I'll walk around with like my sage or my Palo Santo in the house. I'm woo. I told you I wrote a book on owning the woo. Right. So I think when you dive in initially, like as a clinician, at least for me.
Let's talk about, as a clinician, yes, but also let's also add the framework as a person.
As a person.
Right? Because the woo, again, I'm very woo, right? I'm very woo woo. Hello. But I'm also Vinny Brusco from the Bronx, right? So like those two worlds don't really match very well, right? So if you were like, oh, you're Vinny Brusco from the Bronx, you wear shorts and you wear flip-flops, but you're woo-woo, those two things don't make sense. So add the framework of also as a person.
But it makes sense for you.
100%. It couldn't be anybody else, right?
Exactly.
So go ahead.
I think that's the authenticity of it, right? You're just showing up as who you are.
Right.
And that's really important. So that's what I'm smiling while you're saying that, because my husband said this, he's like, you're an undercover hippie. I'm like, okay. I don't know. And he's not by any means woo. He's like really straight and like very, very introvert, like doesn't own woo, not into woo, doesn't even, but he's married to me, which is really fun. But I think he says the comment he always makes is like, you're woo, but you're also Colette from your show.
Yeah,
I'm
Freddie from the Bronx, right?
Right. And that's why when you said that, I was laughing because I said that you should ask your wife what I was like when I was younger. And I was wild. I was a firecracker.
I saw the prom pictures.
I was crazy. I was wild. I mean, I go back and I think of things and I'm like, oh my God. Oh my God. Thank God I'm alive. I mean, like,
right.
But I think that it's sort of evolved to who I became over the years. I mean, I was very lucky to sort of have these connections throughout the years. So I'm a Reiki practitioner, and the woman who's trained me, her name's Shima. She's like the guru of Reiki. She's like the most incredible person I've ever met when it comes into that spiritual world. And I was very lucky to connect with her. And she just kind of took me in as her own. And till this day, we're like really great friends. She came to the baby showers when the babies were born, everything. I also had the opportunity to do like really cool spiritual retreats with people, and it just kind of fit. And so one of the spiritual retreats I did was on positive psychology. So I got certified in positive psychology, and it just kind of fit. I was like, I think it's kind of like when you're in high school, you're trying to figure out who you are, right? It's like really confusing, right? I remember in high school, by the pictures, I showed up as the pretty girl, right? I showed up as the ditzy pretty girl, but I really wasn't that. It wasn't who I was. It was weird. But I tried to own it, right? And I tried to be fit into that mold. And then I kind of took a turn where I kind of went emo, and I was into.
I get it.
You know
I get it. I wore Jenkos. Yeah.
It's like that. That's how I was in high school, and I was trying to figure out who I was. It's kind of that way as a therapist when you first start, and that's why what I was saying is when I first dived in, I sort of went across the board. I was like, okay, so I want to do EMDR. I want to do EFT. I want to do positive psychology. I want to dive a little bit more into CBT, DBT, across the board. And then I kind of want to see where I sit and where I find myself. And where you find yourself is your authentic self, like you said, because you come forward as the person that you are as well. And I think as that was evolving, I was also evolving, and it was just kind of owning who I was. And I think when I said to you, when I initially saw that therapist, that was the light that was shining. Like, who are you? Like, who really are you? Like, do you fit in that mold? Because you don't. Like, where do you fit? And I think when I started to own the woo, and that was that book that I wrote 6 years ago with one of my girlfriends, Christina, that I was like, oh, that's who I am. But it's really vulnerable, right? To go into the place in a clinical world filled of therapists to be like, I'm woo. Because at that time, 7 years, whatever it was, 5, 6, 7 years ago, it wasn't really like broadcasted. It really wasn't at all.
Yeah.
It was, but it wasn't. So it was hard to sort of get to that place and feel safe enough to own it as who I was. So I'm like, now I'm a holistic clinician, right? I'm a spiritual therapist. I come from a holistic background. Some people love it, some people don't, and that's okay. I'm also, like I said, very clinical, and I'm a neuro junkie, and I love to talk about the amygdala and the way the brain works. So it's very interesting, like you said, to sit in the two places but that's what makes up me.
Do you think, the story of the alchemist is that, obviously he goes in this law. It's funny. I had the book on me and I was explaining to Emma in the car and I said, Emma, I'm reading this book and she's like, oh, what's it about? I was like, oh, it's about this young boy who goes on a journey to learn the meaning of life. And she stops. She goes, you don't have to go on a journey to learn the meaning of life. You can learn it where you are. And I was like, well, that's the whole story. He ends up back where he started. Do you think that there's that moment where I'm like,
just about to say,
let's not dismiss that obviously, but like, there's that moment where you're like, oh, okay, I am showing up in the best,
cool?
It's working.
It's magic.
It's magic. We'll get into magic. Do you think that circling back to where you are now, I know you said you went through your arc, you went through your story. Are you back to the person you were? And who knows what age that is? Is it 3? Is it 4? Is it 5? Who knows? Are you back to that person that you were before the world started to introduce itself to you?
I think that's a really good question. I like that question. I never thought of that, but now that you're asking that question, my brain's sort of jumping to different places. Yes, I would say yes, because I was like, as a child, I was kind of quirky and outside the box and a little woo, like literally. So I think I lost that part because of life, because of expectations, right? Because of like who I thought I had to show up as and experiences and trauma. And I think full circle, not that I'm full circle, that I'm back there because I'm always working on myself,
of course.
right? Like showing up.
But you're more so there than you're not.
But I'm more of who I really am.
Yeah.
And like, that's how, like my husband's always like, you're so outgoing. Like you don't give a shit what anybody thinks. I'm like, but I'm just being myself. I'm not even trying. Like, I'm not even like, I don't care. Like if you like me, like, that's where I think was really nice that I've gotten to now at this point in my life. Like, I don't care if you like me or you don't like me, right? Like, it doesn't matter. It's okay. I'm just going to be myself. And like, you either embrace it or you don't, and that's okay. You know what I mean? And I think that's what's very hard and still that I work on every day, right? Because that's very vulnerable to be in a place of like just showing up who you are. I always say you show up like naked and unveiled. This is a really great exercise. I give this to my clients a lot. So what I say is like as a child, we show up naked, right? We're unveiled, we're naked, we're literally coming into the world naked, exposed, vulnerable and everything. And throughout the years, what happens is we begin to pick up layers of clothing and sometimes they don't even belong to us. So I say in high school, like I had to show up as the pretty girl, right? Like I had it all together. I like didn't.
Was this after your mom passed or before?
After.
Got it.
And that was sort of my trauma response, right? Like I strived for perfection. I had to be the thinnest and have the whatever it was. And that's what I molded myself into. It was not who I was, right? And so those were the layers of clothing that I picked up. So it might have been a jacket that I saw somebody else wearing that I thought I needed, or a hat, a pair of shoes, a pair of pants, jeans on top of that. And by the end of that journey, like I was wearing 5,000 pounds of clothing that didn't belong to me. And through therapy, what I say I did was I like started to unveil and undress and like get down to my naked true self, back to center, how I was born and who I truly am. That was removing those layers. So it's like, was that me? No, that really wasn't me, right? Like,
but you needed that version of you to show up as the version you are now.
100%. But it was a hard journey, and I'm still on that journey. Still on that journey.
How do you? So if you have someone who's on the journey of, we'll call it self-actualization for this framework, right? And they're putting on these layers of clothes and you realize it as a therapist, how do you approach that? Is it something where you're like, do you take that kind of hard line to say like, hello, you're doing shit, right? Because so much of this is cyclical, right? Like I'll read old journals of mine and I'm revisiting the same bullshit that I was revisiting X amount of years ago, right? With this new expression of it. So how do you get people out of those loops of kind of wearing clothes that aren't theirs?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we do kind of follow on rotation, right? So like that's what humans do. We follow on rotation. It's natural. It's easy to get to. There's neurons that have binded that, still have memory within us. And we go to there, right? We go to that place over and over.
Calcified neurological pathways of our personalities, right?
Pathways are there, right? They just don't get erased, right? We can create new ones. And so like sometimes in therapy, what you kind of have to do is like put a stop to it. And I am that way as a therapist. And again, that took years and years to get to this place where I'm like, well, this is a rotation, right? Like, don't you want to stop it? Like, wait, let's like take the mirror literally and look at this and like, what's happening here? Like, what's really, really going on, right? Because this is the same thing that you told me about that happened 2 years ago, or I've been working with you for a year now and we're back to that place again, right? We're in rotation. What do we have to do differently? And sometimes it's that, like you said, that approach where it's like abrupt and like, what the fuck's going on? What happened here? You answered that guy, that text. I mean, we talked about him, right? He wasn't good for you. Why did you do that? And
why do people do that?
Well, I think it's two parts here. Like as a therapist saying it, it's safe and there's no judgment to it. It's really looking out for your client. But I think when you go back to it, because it feels safe and it feels like something that relationship you were in for 10 years and it's easy to go back to that than start a new one. I think also the other part of this is like, do you ever think back to a relationship that you had years ago, right? And it ended because it was toxic. It was terrible, right? You weren't meant for each other. But you look back on it and you see all the positives. That's what our brain does, right? Yeah. It has like this joyous sort of like honeymoon period of remembering that person or that relationship. And it doesn't remember why. That's why people will say, oh, I wanted to be back with my ex, right? Like we were good together. And you're like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Well, and it's not only in a relationship, it could be in a job. Anywhere. It could be in any aspect of your life where you start to fantasize about the life that could have been with this job it wasn't that bad.
Well, there's the line.
Right? It wasn't that bad. I think there's a quote up here somewhere. Comfort is the worst addiction. There you go. Marcus Aurelius.
There you go.
There's quotes everywhere here.
I love them.
And it is comforting. It's reassuring. And I think that.
And it's safe. It's not
safe.
foreign.
It's safe. And I think that the more you expose yourself to discomfort, which is a really, really uncomfortable thing to do, obviously it's in the name. And we do that, and I've spoken about this a ton, but we do that in vacuums, or we do that in cold plunges or sensory deprivation tanks, or we do it in saunas or workouts or whatever it is. We create this discomfort that we are comfortable with, right? Because we're creating it. But in a conversation with like Stefania, when she's in the depths of cancer, that's real fucking discomfort. How do you interface with the world and yourself when you are diagnosed with cancer and you have 2 small children and a husband? Now let's see how comfortable you are.
Yeah.
That's a different conversation.
So that's something that I told you, my nanny or my mom, something like that, like I get very emotional about, because I think she's like one of the most powerful, strongest humans I've ever met, ever. And like, I just, as an empath, I put myself in that place. I'm like, how the fuck did she do that?
Yeah.
Like she's incredible.
Yeah.
Because like life is scary in itself, but for someone to say that to you, and then you have to fight for your fucking life.
Yeah.
With kids. And let me tell you something she says all the time. I didn't have a choice, Colette. Yeah. When you're faced with that, you just fucking fight. It's like a switch that goes off and you just go for it, which is so like, I think of it as a therapist, right? And take a step back and I'm like, fight, flight, freeze, fawn response.
Of course.
She was in fight and she fought for her fucking life and she won.
But not everybody does that.
Not everybody does. I think because it's not that it's a choice, but I think you're in such a vulnerable, exposed, scary place that I don't know where your brain could take you with that. What do you do with that? Do you just give up?
Well, when I was speaking to her and I said something along like, did you allow any negativity creep in? And she's like, I couldn't afford to.
No.
Right. And how often do we take the luxury of our lives for granted that we allow the negativity to creep in? We allow the bad choice to creep in, and we allow that to, it's just this one thing. It's just this one meal. It's just, I didn't go to the gym this one time. And I wrestle with that because like, where do you give yourself grace in error, right? Being a human. And where do you not allow that and have a fucking steel mind of not allowing anything to penetrate that? No negative thoughts. Like, how do you be the gatekeeper, the Gandalf, thou shall not pass? How do you do that for your own mind?
Yeah. I think that's a really good question. Well, I think that if it's all or nothing, sort of like the no expectations, which I think kind of, like I said, I do follow that, but there's like script to switch it up because sometimes there is expectations.
Sure.
I think if you put that on you and it's like all or nothing, then like you're striving for perfection, right? Where it's like, well, I couldn't have eaten that. I shouldn't have done this. I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't have picked up that call, right? I should have just been totally with the kids. It's like, well, then you're striving to be perfect, right? And again, there's no such thing as perfection. You need to be perfectly imperfect and own that.
Right.
And she, I don't know, I think that ball got thrown in her court, and I would say she had a choice, but maybe she didn't have a choice, right? Because it just got thrown in her court. Like we, as humans, we hate change, right? That's part of it too. We hate change. We fight change. Even the most amazing changes in life, right? Even the most beautiful things, getting married. Well, you're still scared, right? You're still fighting it, right? Having kids, you're still scared. You're still fighting it. We are so innately like you said, the neurons are so plated in us that like we follow that script, that we hate change so much that we'll go back to an ex, right?
So how do we shift out of having that resistance to change? Because you even just said it, like you could have good change and you still have this reluctancy to let go into it. And whether you want to say that's a spiritual letting go, that's a metaphorical letting go, whatever it is, there's a great book by Dr. David Dawkins called Letting Go. And
it's funny. Did you see me looking at my phone? Because I was trying to think of what it was called.
Oh, really? Yes. I have it here somewhere.
That's really funny. Maybe I saw it.
But there is this reluctancy to just fall into the unknown and allow yourself to just embrace the journey, right? So how would you, as a therapist, offer that advice on how to, I know you're not supposed to offer advice, but you know what I'm saying? How do you offer that insight and that perspective of just letting go to the unknown and allowing it to unfold as it's going to?
So I think there's like two steps to that. The first part is like embracing the uncomfortable feelings with it, right? And like really owning it. A lot of times what happens is like people don't want to feel that stuff. They want to ignore it. They want to put a Band-Aid over it. They want to push it to the side.
They just want to do CBT therapy.
Well, that's okay. It works.
Right.
But I think it's part of this is just like owning whatever's coming up and allowing it to have space. So I always say, these are your feelings, these are your emotions. It's very cliche, but they're there for a reason. We have to own them. We have to respect them. Let's just stay here. So you have to stay in that yucky place. Like, what's coming up? Well, I'm the most exciting things. I'm getting married, but I don't know if it's the right person, right? Or I'm scared for change, right? Or like who I'm going to be. Because then after that, the expectations, I'm going to have kids and I don't want to have kids, whatever it is. Like, okay, so stay there. Stay in all that. Own all that.
Sit in the discomfort.
Embrace it. Just sit in it. Just sit in it for a little bit. Because a lot of times that's what happens. People don't actually sit in it and embrace it. They push it away because, the mother-in-law says, you're going to be okay, right? You'll be fine. Like the wedding's going to be great. It's all going to be toxic positivity, right? Like this is a good change. Like just be happy. He's a great guy. It's like, no, the opposite. You just feel shitty about it and that's okay. To feel scared, to feel vulnerable, because it is a big change. And again, as human beings, we absolutely hate change. We hate it. Even the best change, even the most exciting, because it goes against the grain of what we're scripted as our norm, right? And it puts us in a vulnerable place. And that's, again, why you might go back to that old job and say, like, it wasn't that bad. Well, because you don't want to change. You don't want that change, right? You're saying it wasn't that bad, but when you were in it, it was horrible. That's what I say sometimes to clients, right? Like when you were in it, you had the most horrific experiences, right? Like you hated what you did. It didn't justify who you were as a person, right? The passion wasn't there. But now you're saying, oh, like I got this opportunity. I'm going to go back to it. Like, are you going back to it because you want to go back to it? Or are you going back to it because it's safe?
Right.
Like you've already had that pattern there and you don't want to embrace the change. And listen, I get it. You don't want to embrace change. Like it's hard to sit in that with all those different emotions that come up.
Well, I think sitting in it, and it is so uncomfortable. I mean, and there's another quote behind you, but all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. And I think that's part of, for me in my personal journey, I've spoken about this many a time, but going into the sensory deprivation tank. And before I did it, my thought was, I'm afraid of what I'm going to think. And then in that moment, my other part of my brain said, well, that's scarier than anything you'll think inside that tank, because those thoughts are happening, whether you're conscious of them or you're not. And whether you interface with them or you don't, those thoughts are happening. So you need to either A, choose to interface with them, look at them, stare at them, be uncomfortable with them, and just allow them to be. It doesn't mean you have to make a radical change. It doesn't mean you have to take any action. You just have to sit with the discomfort, or ignore them, suppress them, don't interface with them, let them, sit deep within yourself. And they're going to and then they're going to express themselves in some other way, shape, or form, whether it be health or whatever it may be. Yeah. So I think you're absolutely right in sitting with that discomfort and sitting with, the ideas of what stirs up after that first 20 minutes of a meditation, when all the to-do list goes down and the real shit starts to bubble up. And you're like, oh, fuck that, I'm done.
Yeah. I'll never forget the therapist that I was seeing initially when I started my practice, who was like I think I told you this, was like the supervisor sort of mentor role for me. So I went to see him because he owned a private practice, and there's a lot to figure out to own your own practice, right? To open your own practice. I went to see him and I was in a meeting with him, and I forgot what we were talking about exactly, but I was like, I'm a go-getter, right? I want to do this. I want to do that. Like I have the TV show, the podcast, right? Like the books that I'm writing, like I want to do the group practice. It was like, I was like stretching so high, right? And he was like, this is a light bulb moment. And I was like, what? And he was like, you're not just like a hustler. You're not just like a go-getter. Like, I'm going to shine the light at you. There is so much shit behind that. And I'm like, what? It's kind of like when you're deep in that meditation, what do you mean? Oh, and then he was like, you're not here for your practice to support you building a private practice. You're here for your own therapy. That's what you need to be here for. And I was like, what the fuck? And I remember walking out almost being like angry with the guy. Like, no, I'm a hustler. Like, I want to make something of myself. I want to show myself. And then I took a step back when I made that statement. I was like, I want to show. And I was like, oh my God. Like, I don't want to see all the other shit that I've been through, that instead I just look at the next goal that I need to achieve. I don't want to go back and see all the stuff that I've been through, right? Like I don't want to experience that. So instead I've replaced it with the fact that I'm going to go. And that's like sitting deep in that meditation and seeing what was coming up. He shined the light at me and I was like, I had no choice but to look at it all.
Yeah, but there is a difference between, and I agree with that, but there's also having aspirations and goals and things that you want to accomplish in life. And I jokingly will say, like, if you ask me, I don't do enough, and I do a fucking shitload of things, right? Like literally to the point where just the other day I was like, yeah, I think I bit off more than I could chew at this point, right? I think I'm just fucking chomping right now, and right now I got to chew, and that's fine. That's where I am, and we'll get there, and we'll chew through it. But I think that there's also like goals and aspirations, and it's a fine line when you are a go-getter and you have a vision of where you want to be, and you have the end goal in mind, and you're trying to reverse engineer it to the present, and you're trying to live present to move forward into where your goals are, and that's a beautiful thing of aspiration. But there is toxic aspiration where you're just not interfacing with anything else, and you're only going for goals. And then you get there and it's next thing. And it's never fulfilling.
That's literally exactly what I was doing. Like it was never enough. I needed to do more. I needed to be more. I need to show up more. And I honestly, I think again, once I got to that place and he shined that light on me, it was like I had to unveil. I had to undress. I had to get down to like the deep, vulnerable, seated places of myself that I did not want to go to, right? Because I'd have to embrace it and sit in it, and it was scary. But once I did, I started to realize like the next goal is not where I need to be. Maybe right now where I need to be is just in this moment, just where I am. Like, I'd be like, oh, I need to do this in the practice. I need to do this. And I remember a friend saying to me, like, if it's not broken, why are you trying to fix it? Like, you're doing great. What are you doing? And I always wanted to do more. And it was like, again, that was that light bulb moment where I was like, you're right. What am I doing? Like, why can't I just be happy in this right now? Why can't I just be in this? And I think that's when it all started to kind of just shift for me, where I started to see life and myself in another lens, right? And again, not easy journey by any means, but it was like, why can't I just be present with this? Why can't I just sit in this? Like with the kids, even the chaos. I always say, my life is chaos. I have 4 kids, right? Like I work full time. Like I never stop. It's chaos. There's no way to not stop, right, with all this. But I'm choosing to embrace the chaos and honestly just swim in it and be in it. And I want to be in it forever. Because one day, right, I'm going to look back and be like, those were the days. Those were the days. Those were the good old days. Those were the moments. That was it. That was all of it. And now, right, it's gotten me how many years to get to this place? 15 years, right, of really deep work to be like, I don't need the next thing. I don't need the next thing. I just want to be in this right now. I just want to stay here.
Yeah, that's a beautiful place to be.
It's a nice place to be, but it took a lot of really scary journeys
Yeah.
to get there.
What are your thoughts on like things like plant medicines and kind of all of the other modalities that are being used?
That's a really good one. So one of the clinicians that I work with, Maggie, she's all into that world. She knows all about it. And it's funny because we're taking a trip in a couple weeks. And I said, there's so much we have to catch up and talk about. And that was one of the things that I wanted to dive and like piece off of her brain a little bit, because there's so much with that. Like there's so much different stuff that's coming up. I mean, like they have the ketamine studies, right? For depression, the microdosing, like there's, I don't know.
Psilocybin, microdosing, ayahuasca, obviously, all the different plant,
I don't know a lot about it. I'm not like super like educated, experienced in it, but she does. So I'm going to try to pick her brain a little bit to learn.
Another powerful one is breath work. Do you engage in breath work or anything like that? Yeah. That can be very psychedelic, and you can go to some really deep places in breath work experiences, deeper than even any of the plant medicines.
Yeah. I did that a lot when I started opening up this journey. So like at the same time while I was doing like all that therapy hard work is kind of when I embraced the spiritual woo part of myself. And I did, the Reiki stuff. I did like the Akasha readings. I did all of this funky stuff that like before it was too scary to go into. And then I was starting to embrace it. And it takes you to like some crazy places, like some really interesting, like who were you in your last life? And like, what does that mean to this life? And what were your connections to it? And things like, it's really, really cool.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Right now, my journey is circling into the world of Christianity and God and leaning into that right now. So I'm embracing that to the best of my ability and seeing what comes up for me in that. And so much of the serendipities, if you will, are really supporting that right now on my journey. So I'm like, all right, cool. I'm like, all right,
you must
this
have
works.
manifested it. It's just working.
So I know we're tight for time, so I want to talk about manifestation real quick. It is a word that gets thrown around. It's very fluffy. It's very pie in the sky, and it is very much so like sounds great, but what do I actually do? So for someone who's in their very early stages, I'm thinking of someone in particular, my sister, who is like, I don't understand, because she took me to go see Gabby Bernstein. Both my sisters
Universe has your
took
back.
me, and it was great experience. My sister's like, I don't understand what I'm supposed to be doing. So for someone who's looking to understand manifestation and understand what that journey looks like, and they want to create a life of more alignment, more fulfillment, what does that look like? What is the process for manifestation?
That's a good question. So I would say like start really small, like seriously start really, really small. Like, what do you want tomorrow to look like? Right? Like, what does it look like for you? What do you feel like? Who are you? What are you showing up as? What are you doing? Where are you going? Right? Okay. Take that from one day and let's take that in a month. Like, where do you kind of want to be in a month, right? What do you want to look like in a month? Then we're going to go farther, 1 year, 6 months, 5 years, right? And that's honestly what I did with my practice. I was like, if I close my eyes, right? And I get to that place, what does my practice look like? Or as a mother, right? Or as having a family, like my husband didn't want 1 kid. He didn't want 2, he didn't want 3, he didn't want 4. Manifest that shit.
Yeah.
I was like, but he loves it now. He's embraced it all. But I was like, what do I see for my future? I don't know. I just always said like, there's 4 kids. I don't know what it is. I mean, I had twins. I wasn't supposed to have twins, right? That was a huge surprise. But I always kind of would sit on it and be like, I don't know. There's 4 kids there. What does that mean? What does that look like? And I literally would close my eyes and paint a picture of it and fill it in. Like fill in the blanks, what it looked like, what were names that were coming. I did this in meditations, like seriously meditated on it. Now, I would start very small. Like, what do you want next month to look like, right? Or in a year, 6 months. But 5 years from now, if you close your eyes, like, what does your world look like? What do you look like? Who are you surrounded with? And then as I got that picture and I filled it in, I would embrace it and I would kind of take my journey in that direction. Like, how do I get there? Well, what does that mean? Like, who am I becoming as I'm going down that road to get there? Like right now, we have to move and buy a bigger house because there's so many damn kids and we need a better school district, right? That's what I'm manifesting. What does that house look like? I'm going to close my eyes and I'm literally going to paint the picture.
Yeah. And how granular should someone get? Like how detail oriented?
I think as detailed as you want.
Yeah. Yeah. When I do visualization practices with, as a homework assignment, I actually gave one, I was like down to like what you eat for fucking breakfast, lunch, dinner, like, because all of that is going to fuel that person that you ultimately want to be. And as much as it's important to visualize that, I think it's also important to embrace the feeling that it creates inside your body.
Energetically, 100%. Like, what is it bringing up for you? Like, as you paint the picture of the house, like, what is that energy that you're feeling, right? Does it feel good? Does it feel, I always talk about like Reiki stuff. Does it feel like it's more towards the color green, towards the color blue? Like, what are you owning in that, right? What are you working towards? I also think it's really important, though, if you put a lot of detail in, to accept the fact that the detail may not be the detail that you put in. So for instance, I wanted another baby. We had 2 boys, wanted another baby.
You weren't specific enough.
And everybody's like, oh, wait, did you want a girl? I'm like, no, I just wanted another baby, right? And so like, that's what I kept manifesting and throwing out into the universe. One more baby, one more baby, one more baby. I wasn't very specific. And what happens? I got twins and they were girls, right? It's like, so it didn't paint the picture of what I was like so detailed on, right? It didn't fulfill that. It fulfilled even more.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah. And most times it's that ambiguity, blah, 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 as I butcher that word, when you leave it up to whatever you want to use, source, universe, God, it's even better, right? When you kind of let go of it has to be a boy or it has to be a girl. When you give it this baby, right? It's so much more.
Yeah. But that's what I think. Sometimes people will put so much detail into it. They're like, it needs to be this, this, this. And they might still get it, but it might not be what they were thinking in all those details. And you have to accept the fact that you got it, right? And it might look like even better, or it might not look exactly how you painted it, but you got it.
Right.
And that is so beautiful.
And honor the fact that you got it, and don't use it not being exactly what you wanted as a dismissal of you actually creating that and bringing it to the 3D world.
Like, own it. It's yours.
Awesome. I know we're tight for time. We both have tons of children to pick up.
So many.
This was amazing.
So great.
I feel like we could do like another 3 hours.
100%.
We'll have to do it again.
Yes.
Where can people connect with you if they want to get your practices, if they want your services? Where can they connect?
So they can go right to the website. So it's newdayvitalitytherapy.com, or you could just Google New Day Vitality Therapy in Westchester and we come right up, the website.
Awesome. Well, I love people who are in their space, who are showing up authentically. The energy that you give off is just so genuinely you. And I'm happy that you've arrived in a place where you're showing up as you, right? That's the most important thing we could do. Thank you. I appreciate that.
That's why I told you the first time I talked to you, we vibed. You got that.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I'm working on taking compliments better, so I will receive that and say thank you.
And thank you as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much.